just one thing. And I'd like to start with a quote from Rumi. It's a very direct quote, very direct. And the quote is, "There's one thing in this world you must never forget to do. If you forget everything else and not this, there's nothing to worry about. But if you remember everything else and forget this, then you will have done nothing in your life." Like I said, quite direct. Just take a very mundane example of what we're talking about. Let's just say your spouse has a new boss at work, and they've invited this new boss over for dinner, and the person's of Italian descent, so you decide to make a spaghetti dinner for them and spend all afternoon in preparation for impressing their new boss. And then maybe an hour before dinner, you realize that there's no pasta in the pantry. Everything else, there's a full course meal. We're just missing the pasta for the spaghetti dinner. You offer to run to the store and get some pasta. That's the one thing that's needed to complete this dinner. So off you go. You come back from your shopping trip. The boss is, 15 minutes away, and you come back with, I don't know, some batteries and a pair of socks. No pasta. Right? What's your spouse going to say? It's like one thing. All you needed to do was one thing. Didn't matter if you did other things, that's fine, but the one thing that was really essential, you didn't do. So it's sort of that sense. So what's this one thing that Rumi is talking about? The one essential thing in this lifetime that makes living this life worthwhile. And that is the discovery of what we truly are, what is actually living this life. I mean, for most of us, we grew up believing that what's living this life is, well, me, right? Me, this body, my ideas and opinions and my appearance and what I do and what I don't do and my hobbies and my history and, what my beliefs are and all of that whole package that this body-mind adopts over the course of a lifetime, mostly unknowingly as we grow up, just sort of assume this conditioning just based on where we grew up, the family, the parents, the school, teachers, our first grade friends, all of that contribute to our perception of the world, how we see other people, how we see the world, how we see ourselves, what we're good at, what we're not. That whole constellation, that package that we take ourselves to be, is fine. It is as it is, right? But it's not the one thing that Rumi's talking about. He's talking about what's actually living this life. And if we look at this package that we take ourselves to be, we can see over time that changes. It's not a permanent thing. I mean, the body clearly ages. Our opinions change. Our situation changes day to day. Our storyline is always evolving. We sort of piece it together through memory, but it's always changing. So is what we are just totally in flux? There's no solid ground anywhere? Or is there something that is unchangeable? What Rumi's talking about is that which is unchangeable, that is living this life. So we just pointed to it briefly in the introductory meditation, just this awareness of whatever it is that we're experiencing. So we can, it doesn't really matter what name we give it. We can call it awareness. We can call it consciousness. We can call it just noticing. We can even call it spirit, if you like. But it has certain characteristics in that it is formless. It doesn't have a particular form. Everything in the world of form, whether it's the stars or the blade of grass or a rabbit, everything has a particular form, a duration, a size, a color, a flavor somehow. Same is true with thoughts and feelings. Those are also transient objects appearing within consciousness. But then there's this consciousness. Is that changing? Or is it actually the same capacity just to be aware of whatever's happening? So when we really start to look, we can see that this awareness or spirit is formless. It hasn't been birthed into this world of form. The body clearly has. The mind clearly has. It's a unit, body-mind. That's clearly in this world of form. It will have a duration. It will have a birth, life, and death. But the question is this awareness subject to coming and going? Is it subject to whatever happens day to day? So this becomes the key question. What is actually living this life? So Rumi had this very direct quote about the one essential thing. But Socrates also essentially said the same thing. Again, has an edge to it, a certain harshness to it, but a certain truth to it also. And what Socrates said before he was killed for expressing these kind of views was that an unexamined life is not worth living. Right? And clearly there's lots of reasons for living this life. I mean, there's joys to be had, there's families to be a part of, there's careers to explore, adventures to be had, all kinds of sensations and ideas to explore. All of that's beautiful. The only question is, it sufficient? Is it sufficient to quench our thirst? And I'd suggest that it is as beautiful as our everyday life is. It calls into question, and to what are we serving if we don't know what it is that's actually living this life? And we can say, well, it's me, of course, right? Me, I'm the one living this life. But that's just giving a name, namely me, to whatever it is that we're experiencing. But it doesn't really get us any closer to understanding or seeing or recognizing what that actually is. And the freedom comes from the recognition of what is truly living this life. Because everything else comes and goes. Everything else has a lifespan. Except this one thing. The one thing that is actually living this life. So if we're willing to investigate what that is, and we understand that whatever it is, it must be present now. and always, right? If it's essential, it must be present now. If it's essential, it couldn't be absent now. It couldn't be absent ever if it were essential to our beingness. So if that's discovered or recognized, then life makes sense. Everything falls into place. And that's why it's been said, by many people over the ages that if we understand who we are in our own deepest nature, if we discover it there, because it's far easier to discover it in ourselves first, then we can see it everywhere, in everything. So the most direct path is to look for what's already present. If we're looking for something that's not present, then whatever that is, a philosophy, a theory, an idea, an adventure, an experience, even a spiritual experience, if we're looking for something that's not here now, whatever that is, will not be it. Because our deepest nature, our essential self, is and can only be always present. So if we're looking anywhere else other than here, we will miss it. And it doesn't require an extraordinary event. Sometimes it's that realization is concurrent with a beautiful, explosive, blissful event. That's nice, beautiful. But the sensations that are experienced are often a result of relief from what we took ourselves to be. The relief from the constricting beliefs about ourselves feels so good, it feels like bliss. And we seek relief from the sense of self all the time in many ways. I mean, we do it when we go to the movies, and for 2 hours, if it's a good movie, we forget about ourselves. We're engrossed in the movie, and we've forgotten all about our problems and our identities and who we are and what we're good at. We don't even remember what our name is. I mean, we could if we tried, but the only reason you try is if it weren't a very good movie. If the movie's good enough, you're totally absorbed in the movie, and that feels good. It feels good to forget about ourselves for a while. So there's a quite famous Zen saying, and that is, to know yourself is to forget yourself. And to forget yourself is to be enlightened by the 10,000 things. 10,000 things just means everything else. So to know yourself is to forget yourself. When we remember ourselves, that's when we're locked in our egoic identity. Who I am, what I know, what I believe, what my limitations are, what failures I've had in the past, what things I feel guilty about, all of that. Right? When we forget that, even for a minute, even for a few minutes, that's what awakeness feels like. We're not dwelling on the sense of me. So that happens much more often than we give it credit for. If we're just doing something that we really enjoy doing, I mean, even just walking in the woods or gardening or cooking, or at those moments when we're totally engaged in the activity, there's no sense of self. To know yourself is to forget yourself. Forget yourself in the activity, and then there's just awareness, and whatever's appearing in the awareness. There's not a self that's been inserted in the middle of that. Right? Does that make sense? So we can notice this when we sit down to meditate, because the sort of attitude that we bring to meditation is often the same attitude that we walk around with day to day. If we walk around in sort of a state where we're sort of have a hair trigger towards self-condemnation, and we tend to do the same thing in meditation. Like we condemn ourselves for not getting it right, sort of holding a firm grip on what we want to happen and judge ourselves inadequate if it doesn't happen that way. But that's not actually what meditation is for. It's actually sort of a concentrated way of noticing how we are experiencing life. So if we sit down and just allow everything to happen, whatever thoughts may arise, whatever feelings, whatever sensations in the body may arise, whatever sounds we may hear, just allow it all to be. There's no resistance. There's no resistance. There's no ego. It's what ego is made of. Resistance against, everything else. The world, other people, how things should be. I like this, I don't like that. That kind of resistance. But when we're just sitting and allowing everything to be, then this sense of self doesn't have anywhere to sort of get its claws dug in. It's an open, perceptive sense. So when we started out, we talked about just this one thing, made it sound like almost like a do or die kind of situation. And it is vitally important. It is truly the one thing that this life is about, one thing that we have an opportunity in this lifetime to discover. If we are diligent about that, then it's very likely that we will discover that in our lifetime. It may take some effort. That's true. Paradoxically, it may take some effort to reach the effortless state, but it's the same as sometimes you've heard people say, well, I go to work every day, but it's not really work because I enjoy what I'm doing, so it doesn't feel like work. So it's still effort, but you could say it's not effort where I have to sort of push myself and make myself do something that it doesn't really want to do. Not effort in that sense. If there's a curiosity and a wonder about what it is that's living this life, then yes, there's effort, but it doesn't feel like effort. You could say it's effortless effort. And when that capacity that we all have is discovered for ourselves in our own direct experience, then life becomes much easier, much more pleasant. And we find when we look back at our prior life that we can sort of remember it and remember what it felt like, and then even if it felt relatively good by comparison, it still wasn't it. So there's something of tremendous value here, but at the same time, two things. One is that when we're talking about recognizing our essential being, it can be recognized at any moment. It doesn't require decades of meditation. It doesn't require a particular experience. It just requires us to be willing to look what's already present with enough sort of self-honesty and diligence to see what's already present. So it can be noticed in a moment. It doesn't require years. It doesn't require adopting any new philosophy. It only requires that we have the willingness and earnestness and self-honesty to look directly for ourselves what is already present. And it can happen in a moment. It's not a gradual thing. It can be to a certain extent, but the seeing can happen in a moment, because it's not an attainment. We don't have to sort of gradually learn it. We have to recognize what's already present, this capacity to be aware. And the second thing is that you're already that. So even if you don't recognize it in this lifetime, there's actually nothing fundamentally lost. Yes, it would be nice, sure, but even if we, despite our best efforts or our curiosity or where our interests lie, that's not discovered, we still are what we are. We couldn't be anything other than that. So there's no ultimate downside. It's all source living through all of us. Looks different one place than another. Animals look different than trees. Clouds look different than stones. Just differences in appearance, but all of that is a manifestation of the one source. And in this lifetime, we're privileged enough to have these body minds that can perceive the wonder of creation. So what we're talking about is not in any way a put down for this world of form. It is just emphasizing what is even more fundamental than that, which is the capacity to be aware of this world of form, including these body minds. And so it just takes a moment of recognition. There's a Zen phrase that's applicable here, and that is that a single lamp can dispel 1,000 years of darkness. In other words, we might be, asleep at the wheel for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and in a moment recognize, oh, that's what's actually living this life. Beautiful. All that's needed. And then, of course, more seen from that point on, but we could say that's almost like the threshold where we cross into a true spiritual life. Before that, it's just sort of finding the front door. Once we've found the front door, even if we open it just a few inches and peek inside, that's enough to let us know what is possible and where the entrance is. And then the more we allow our own exploration of that, the more is revealed.